Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and we've got a jam-packed episode for you. It's the market update. We'll be covering house prices, a rental boom, mortgage updates, and so much more. Let's get going.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This week we're rounding up all the essential news you need to know about in the property market and bringing you our analysis from people who spend all day, every day immersed in this market. And remember, we love doing this once a month, but we also round up the most important property news for you every single week in our free newsletter, Property Pulse. So if you're not signed up to that already, go to propertyhub.net/pulse. Then you'll be completely up to speed with everything that's happening in property in just a couple of minutes per week. Now, just quickly, we mentioned last week that we are crowdfunding again. Yes, you can invest in our business. You can own a little piece, be an actual shareholder in everything we do. And my goodness, Rob, the level of interest we've had within a week of mentioning this, we've had more people signing up and registering their interest than we had in the entire campaign last time. And last time ended up being pretty big. So absolutely blown away once again by the Property Podcast audience.
Yeah, it is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for your support. Thank you for wanting to be shareholders and come on this journey with us. It's absolutely amazing. Now, we are at pre-registration phase, so we haven't gone live with it yet, so don't panic. Don't be like, oh, wait a minute, I registered and nothing's happened. We are still at pre-reg stage. We are going to be for one more week. So if you've pre-registered, amazing. Thank you. But if you haven't yet, then you could go to propertyhub.net/crowdfund. That's propertyhub.net/crowdfund and get involved. Judging by the first week in, it's going to be a fantastic event, a fantastic raise. So if you want to be a part of it and don't miss out like so many people did last time, then go to propertyhub.net/crowdfund.
Right, let's get into our market updates. So much to cover. And while we're riding the good news train, Rob, let's start with the big picture. And good news for the economy. We mentioned it briefly the other week, but I think there's been another story out since to confirm this. No recession. So we're going to be having the longest, darkest, most painful recession ever. Then it was going to happen, but it's going to be a bit later. Then actually, maybe it's not going to be that long at all. And now the Bank of England have come out and said, not only have we not gone into recession so far, that we probably won't. So that is quite the turnaround. And it feeds into, Rob, something that we said that we thought would happen in the first quarter of this year and has done, which is that sentiment has shifted quite dramatically and things are really not as bad and gloomy and dark as they seemed in the tail end of last year.
That's right. And it's great that we can be in your ears right now and say, you know what, we don't think it's going to be as bad as others are reporting. But you know what? The Bank of England has a bigger reach than us. And that's fine. They should. But this news story both delights me and angers me. And I'll start with the anger so we can go to a positive. But the anger part is the Bank of England told everybody that the UK was going to go into a 2-year recession. And if you tell people that things are that bad, people start to behave differently and they start to make changes. And I actually think by telling everyone that it was going to be that bad, that we are probably not as far on as we could be right now. Yes, we're not going into recession, and that's amazing, and that's great, because who wants a recession? But it could have been even better than it is now, because people would have modified their behaviours. We saw it. We deal with property investors day in, day out, and how people were sort of the back end of last year and even into January compared to where they are now, just a few months later, is vast. But why were people acting that way the end of last year and in January? Well, the reason why was because there was so much negativity coming at them. And it's hard to get more negative than being told by possibly the biggest authority on our economy that we are going into a 2-year recession. And they've backtracked all the way to we're not going into recession. It's a joke. Like, it really, really annoys me. Why tell everyone that it's going to be a disaster and then go from that to a few months later to no recession? Maybe get a bit sure on what's going to happen before you terrify everyone. So I feel quite passionate about this, as you probably could pick up already, and we've only just started the market update. But the delight, of course, is that it looks like that we're not going to recession at any time soon, which is amazing, because so much is happening in the world right now, which is still not great. But if we're not going into recession when the world is like this now, once things start to sort themselves out, we could get ourselves into quite a good place quite quickly. So that's a great start. But talking of some of the negative things happening, and again, this has happened and not put us into recession, are bank failures. And we've had bank failures over the last month as well. Echoes of 2008 or not?
Yeah, we had a chat about this on the phone when it was happening, and we concluded that it wasn't a 2008 thing, and it wasn't going to affect the big banks, and it wasn't going to lead to hyperinflation and all the kind of mad stuff people were talking about. And that seems to be the case. What has happened is it's made your mortgage a bit cheaper, as we covered a couple of weeks ago on the show, because raising rates seems to be not going very well for various parts of the economy. People now think that rates are not going to go as high as they were and are going to start coming back down in the other direction sooner than they would have done. So the banks failing in the US made for good headlines, and it's something everyone could get very excited about for a couple of weeks. But I don't think this is the first sign that an imminent collapse is on the way.
But what about a house price crash? Is that happening? There was all talk last year of a house price crash. Things seem to have settled down there as well. But I suppose it depends on what source you want to take. Because if you want to, like most things in life, find evidence to support your arguments. If you've got a point of view on the world and you want to back it up, you can go and find data normally on the internet. It's quite a vast place to go and back your opinion up. So if you are keen on the idea of house prices crashing, then your source of choice should be the Nationwide House Price Index. Because the Nationwide are reporting another decline this month and a fall of 0.8, which is actually the 7th in a row, which is crazy, right? Because it doesn't feel like house prices have dipped for that long, which says they are 4.6% below their August peak after taking account of seasonal effects. So 4.6% down since August, which, if you left it there, would sound quite bad. But if you want to argue that property prices are fine, then your data set of choice is Halifax, because Halifax data has actually been quite strong in comparison. Now, frustratingly, the Halifax data comes out the day that this is released, so we can't report on the latest numbers. But over the last few months, they've either been flat or slightly up. So this short-term window is hard to judge. And the truth probably is somewhere in between, that property prices are either a tiny bit down or flat. And that will probably depend on the region that you live in, because that's the thing with an average, right? It's a collection of all the areas. So without a doubt, there'll be some areas in the UK that are doing okay and actually going up. And also, there'll be areas in the UK that are doing worse than the average. Again, it's just how it works. So according to Nationwide, the area that's doing the worst is Scotland, followed by East Anglia and the South East, and the areas doing best are the Midlands and Northern Ireland. So what should you make from all this? The truth lies probably somewhere in the middle, and it's not that sensational, and that property prices over the last 6 months have probably fallen a smidge, but it'll depend on the area you're operating in.
I think that's right. So like you said, Halifax data comes out today in terms of when this is broadcast, so we haven't seen it yet. My supposition is that if that data shows a decline, it'll be a smaller decline than Nationwide, because that's been the pattern so far. And I believe the reason for that is this regional effect, because Nationwide does more of its lending in the south and Halifax does more of its lending in the north. And supposedly that all gets corrected for in the data, but historically that's not been the case. So I believe that's why the Nationwide data is consistently looking worse. I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit in our notes as well to talk about a story in the BBC that shows that's got a good map of the country showing which areas have the highest proportion of mortgages that it calls financially stretched. So this is where a household's mortgage repayments are higher than 30% of their total income. And if you look at that map, it's basically the south. So sort of Northampton and down, very roughly speaking, with obviously the biggest collection in London and the home counties. And this all plays into what we said would happen when we did our predictions at the start of the year, which is that London and the South would fare worse as a result of rising interest rates because affordability was already more stretched to start with. So this is just me making stuff up on the basis of the data. I don't actually know, and we'll have to wait until the end of the year to see how it all plays out. So I think this is probably what we're seeing here. We're probably seeing the South relatively struggling, the North and the Midlands doing okay. And so exactly how you sample to construct your average determines what the data tells you. But the overall point, I think, is although it's all fun to talk about this stuff, it doesn't really matter because for a start, you're not investing for a single year. You're investing for multiple years. So who cares what happened last month? And also, you're not investing in the average. You're investing in a particular area. So if you are going to look at what's happening right now, look at the area, not the average.
London is such an interesting place because for many years now, London has been one of the worst performing areas in the UK for property prices. But yet, rentals over the last few years have charged upwards at an incredible pace. And at some point, yields will become attractive in London. And that's why we've said that we're keeping an eye on London. We think it's too early yet, and neither of us are making any moves, either personally or professionally in London. But It's really, really interesting. And that leads nicely into a really fascinating report from Zoopla. Various news outlets have picked this story up, including the BBC. But Zoopla, or Home Track, which is part of the Zoopla group, have produced a report on the UK rental market. And this is for March. It shows rental inflation in the UK up 11.1%. So, of course, we are seeing interest rate increase on mortgages at the moment. But buy-to-let still works in many areas because rental levels continue to rise. And London is the top of the table. London has seen rents rise by 15.2% over the last 12 months. 15.2%. That is crazy. It's crazy. And that's why London is really interesting. Second is Manchester at 14.4%. It doesn't really surprise me, Manchester, at all, because Manchester is really becoming its own economic powerhouse. And that's not new news. For long-time listeners of the podcast, you know we've been talking about Manchester for a while. I don't think we're the only ones talking about Manchester anymore. I think pretty much everyone is. But Manchester beating even Edinburgh when it comes to the average amount of rent. So the demand of people who want to live in Manchester is really high. But Rob, it doesn't surprise me that Manchester's up there, Edinburgh's up there, and London's up there, because there's just not enough rental stock for those areas. There's not enough coming onto the market. I'm oversimplifying it when I'm saying it's just down to supply and demand, but a lot of it is down to supply and demand. And if there's not enough stock there, which there isn't, and there's lots of people who want to rent there, which there is, then rents will continue to keep going up.
Yeah, I think you're barely oversimplifying, because for rents, that is the dynamic. For house prices, it's more complex and there's loads of stuff going on, and you can't say, well, if you build more houses, then prices will come down. It's complicated. But for rents, it is supply and demand. There are roughly the same number of rental properties as there were in 2015, and yet the population has gone up. The population went up by 500,000 last year, which is the biggest in years. And particularly in cities, there's a shortage, because despite what people thought would be the case a few years ago, cities are where people want to live. And you've got lots of international students coming into cities recently as well, more than usual. So it is a supply and demand thing. The other factor is people's ability to pay. So at some point, however reduced the supply, you'll kind of run into the ceiling where people just can't afford to pay any more of their income on rent. So until incomes go up, rents can't go any further. And that's a point that Zoopla make. Rents are running ahead of incomes. So at some point, the rate of rental growth will slow down. They also talk about the possibility of rents overshooting in markets that are particularly hot, and they mention inner London in particular. And that's something that I agree with, because I've seen it from my own observations. So because I rent in London, I've got alerts set up for sort of like the half-mile radius around me. And for about 6 months, it was rents going up and up and up. And now it's reduced. Multiple reductions, property sticking on the market. And I'm going to be interested to see what happens in my case, because at the point at which like my fixed tenancy came to an end, the market was really strong. So my rent went up massively. By the time it comes back round again next year, unless something dramatic happens, it should be lower. So it'll be in a position where I'm trying to renegotiate rent downwards, which basically never happens. If you're renting, rents only go up. But it has been a pretty dramatic and sudden correction in my part of London. So if that's playing out elsewhere, like I think it is, then I think we can say that ceiling has been tested in London and possibly other popular inner city areas as well. And so we will see that rate of rental growth slowing right down. But across the country at large, it is just going to keep going up for the reasons you've said, Rob.
You've heard it first. Once again on the Property Podcast, we're getting ahead of the data to give you inside info. London rental prices have peaked. There we go. Rob Dix, April 2023. Let's mark that down. Okay. And for those who want to look at the full table, well, we'll link to this report in the show notes. But I'm pleased to report that Nottingham and Birmingham also make the top 5, as well as Manchester. They are areas we all target. So rents very strong in those areas. Now, we could carry on talking about this report because there's so much in there. But what I think we will do is have a podcast episode dedicated to this rental boom and get under the surface of these numbers to help you understand what is happening and where, so you are ahead of the curve of knowing what's happening. Because the rental boom is covered a bit in the media, but not a lot. You hear a lot about property prices all the time, whether it's up or down, but rental prices don't nearly get as much discussion. And there is a rental boom out there. The top 10 cities in the UK all have double-digit rental growth. So the rental boom is something that we'll cover in a future episode in the not too distant future. You know what? I love that we've created an app to help you invest in property. And that app is called Portfolio, where you can experience the benefits of property investment through your phone. To find out more, head over to portfolio.co.uk or search for Portfolio on your app store.
Okay, let's move on to mortgages. Not particularly going to talk about mortgage rates this month because not that much has happened. It's kind of a continuation of the same thing where we've seen rates continuing to fall slightly and continue to fall slightly despite the base rate, of course, going up by 1/4 of a point. But something that is quite interesting is mortgage approvals. So mortgage approvals is the number of new mortgage applications that have been approved after deducting any that have been cancelled. And so it gives you a little bit of a leading indicator about how people are feeling and what activity in the market might be like in future. And obviously this number plummeted in the last quarter of last year because you had the mini budget, you had rates going way up, and you had the general doom and gloom that we've already talked about. But in the last month, this number actually ticked upwards for the first time since August. So it's just been falling all the way since August, but now it's ticked slightly upwards. That's only 1 month and it's only a small gain. But it plays into, Rob, this general theme that's been running through this episode, that things are getting better. People are feeling more positive. It seems like maybe, and this is just commentary, people don't believe there's going to be a house price crash anymore. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going out looking for homes. And they don't believe there's going to be a recession, or they also wouldn't be going out looking to take on a mortgage because they'd be worried about their job. So like I say, just 1 month, but a positive indicator.
Absolutely, Rob. And this is backed up by the Consumer Confidence Index as well. Yes, this is actually measured how confident you are feeling, or we as a nation are feeling. And the last set of data that we had showed confidence now hits its highest level since April 2022, so highest in a year, basically. So even though it felt like the summer just gone, everyone was feeling pretty confident. Confidence levels are beyond that point now. Spring probably helps. The lighter evenings, everyone's just feeling a lot better. And being told that the world was going to end month in, month out, and then nothing happening, people probably started to doubt the Bank of England and other commentators and the media at large. It wasn't actually that bad. And now many of those outlets are telling you, well, turns out, guys, no, it's not going to be as bad as we all said. So I think this is great news. Nobody wants doom and gloom. Nobody wants hard times. We don't necessarily want booms either, because if you have booms, then crashes eventually come. But just having a stable economy where we can all get on with things is a good thing. And if we can have that for the rest of the year, I'm signing up. So let's hope that continues. But the green shoots of spring and the economy, possibly, are there. We'll try our very best to find some positivity now, Rob, because we'll move on to politics. And we have a bit of a quick update on the rental reform bill.
Yeah, this is the long-awaited, much-delayed bill that is going to finally do away with Section 21 evictions. So the process you'll need to go through to get possession of a property back is going to change quite dramatically. We've been talking about this for literally years, but now apparently it is actually happening. And this is my fault because I wrote something a couple of weeks ago saying maybe it wouldn't happen in this parliament because they're running out of time and lots of other things seem to be going on. So you can blame me if you don't like this because I jinxed it. But Michael Gove has said that this will be introduced to parliament in a couple of months' time. Now it's important to be aware that a bill has to go through multiple steps before it becomes law. So it'll take some number of months at least for it actually to make its journey through the Commons and the Lords. And then even after that, there'll be some future date when it actually takes effect. So this isn't something that's going to happen imminently, but we are soon going to start getting more detail about the government's plans and whether they're going to be changing some of their plans that were criticised heavily from all quarters, including a cross-party select committee in just the last month or so. So there's been lots of rumour around this. But finally, we're going to start actually getting some facts and know what we're looking at and start to think about the impact this could have. So for me, this is actually a good thing. So we're going to be getting some facts there, but there's plenty of rumour as well. Do you want a bit of rumour to speculate on, Rob?
Oh, go on, Rob. Give us a bit of rumour.
So Michael Gove has been busy and he's been saying some intriguing things. So one thing that he said in the last couple of weeks, which is a good thing, which is that they've got no intention of bringing in rent caps or rent controls. A cynic might say that income tax is only meant to be temporary and we're not all living in George Osborne's garden cities at the moment. So maybe politicians, what they say and what they do doesn't quite overlap. But I think that still counts as a positive thing. But here's the really interesting one. He said in a Commons debate, the other thing we need to do is make sure that there is fairness in the tax treatment of landlords and others. And that was it. And that was the sentence. Nothing else about it. But is that a hint, Rob, that the very, very unpopular tax changes that came in 2015 could be rolled back, could be altered? I mean, if you squint a bit and you're feeling optimistic, it could be.
Now, I am an optimist, Rob, but even I'm struggling with this one. Because the optics of a government moving to a more favourable position for landlords, even if it's going back to what it used to be, won't be well received. It just won't. Landlords are an easy target to kind of kick and hit with taxes and other treatment. But the optimistic side of me looks at this and goes, well, at least it won't get any worse. If he's talking about improving things, then they're certainly not looking at making it any worse. You never know, Rob. I may be surprised, and maybe they will make some changes, and that would be incredible. But just leaving us alone and letting us get on with business, I'll take that. I could operate in this market. I'm fine. Yes, would I want it better? Of course. But can I operate and do well in this market? Yeah, obviously.
I think you're probably right, but you could actually go even more negative and said, well, he didn't actually say improve, he said fairness, which is always a dangerous word in politics. You could say, well, fair is that landlords get taxed 900% of their profits. So if we actually make it worse, you never know. It could happen. There's also one more interesting thing that he said, which is that they're planning to bring forward some planning changes in another bill that's coming up anyway, which is going to introduce restrictions on how homes can be turned into Airbnbs. So this is, again, something we've covered on the podcast multiple times in the past. We've got local authorities doing it at that level, but it seems like there might be something coming in at the national level as well, because the rise of holiday lets is something that is, of course, actually removing supply from the rental market at a time when we've already said there is a shortage. So it'll be interesting to see what form that takes.
Now it's time for Hub Extra, the part of the show where we want to give you more. And hopefully you've got loads of value from that episode, but we also like to level up. And here is our opportunity to do that. This week, I want to talk about Audible. And you'll be like, what? Audible, Rob? Seriously, you run out of things? Well, of course you would have heard of Audible. And many of you will have a membership with Audible where you get your token every month. And I've even talked about how you can get free books on Audible as part of that membership. But I've been looking recently, and there just seems to be more and more books coming onto Audible that are part of the membership. So it doesn't cost you one of your tokens that you get each month to get a book. These are in addition, and there is no limit. So in the week, I downloaded about 5 different books, which is awesome. But that is not my recommendation. My recommendation is an author, because it seems that nearly all of his books are free to download if you have an Audible membership. So there is no limit. You can go and download them all. And that author, bit of an old one, this one, but Brian Tracy. Now, Brian Tracy is a positive mindset guru type person, increase productivity, have good mindset, setting goals. And I have not downloaded any of his books, I have to admit, because I feel that I've kind of done all those books and my mindset is pretty good and my goal setting is pretty sharp and all the rest of it. When I was a younger man in my early 20s, late teens, I devoured these type of books, and I truly believe it made a difference to my mindset and how I looked at the world and my ambitions. And you don't have to be, a young person to go and read these books. If you feel like you're still not where you want to be in terms of your mindset, your goal setting, and you could do some of these self-help books, then I would highly recommend that you can download a load of Brian Tracy stuff. Brian Tracy is 79 years old, and if he is still writing books, I've not picked up any recently, but the books he used to write, like Eat My Frog and No Excuses, they had a profound impact on me. So if you feel you could benefit from some self-help type content, then Brian Tracy is your man. And a way to devour all his content for free is to have an Audible membership. So go and check that out.
I think it's a really good tip, because it's not necessarily something you'd want to go and spend a credit on and get through start to finish, but for the occasional little mindset or motivation pick up, going and listening to a chapter or two, I think that's a really good idea. So that's us done for another week. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this market update. Let us know your thoughts on what we've covered and what you're seeing going on in your area. We're on all the socials at Property Hub UK. And of course, we will be back with another great episode next Thursday. So we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.